Today's 5/18/2024, 10:30 a.m. and I'm sitting down here with.
Trudi O'Brien.
And Trudy, what is your occupation?
I am a certified shorthand court reporter.
And how did you get into the fishing industry?
I got into the fishing industry. I was packing fish at Gold Nugget Seafood. Morro Bay used to have 7 processing plants in it where they brought in the fish and packed them and put them into 10-pound boxes, which were then put into 100-pound boxes. And I needed a job and I wanted a job, so I went to work at Gold Nugget Seafood, and then was packing fish at Morro Bay Seafood, and a guy came in and asked if I wanted to go on a rock cod trip to fish for black gills and black cod, and I said yes, and I was 15.
And who was that? And what boat was that? Do you
That
remember?
was Tom. I can't think of his last name. He's no longer with us. And the name of the boat was the Tomcat out of Morro Bay.
And are you a native here in local Bay or Morro Bay? Local.
I came here when I was 7 from Redmond, Oregon. So I've been in Morro Bay since I was 7.
And ever since you started on that first boat, and it's been a first love since then?
Yes. Yeah, it has been. I would love to say I was still doing it. My first trip, we went out. I knew Jeremiah, who's my husband, Jeremiah O'Brien. I was not with him at the time, but he gave me a ride down to the boat, and I was looking for the biggest, prettiest fishing boat in Morro Bay, and it was not a bad looking boat. It wasn't the boat that I was thinking it was going to be, but I was on the boat with Tom and his daughter and another crew hand, so there were 3 of us as a crew, and that's quite a few. Normally it's just one crew person for a rock cod troll boat. And we went out early in the morning, and I remember baiting the hooks. It was long lines, so there were, I don't know, 150 hooks on each line, and we had to put squid on each one of them, and it was freezing cold, and the squid was frozen, but it was really cool. And then we put the lines in the water, and I'd never been on a boat on the ocean, so it was everything about it. The weather was beautiful. The ocean was flat. We went to the Santa Lucia Banks outside of Morro Bay. I'm not sure how far it is, maybe 50 miles. And every single line, they called it, came up colors. Every single hook had a fish on it, and they all floated up, and there were red rock cod. They weren't reds. Can't think of what they're called now, but there were rock cod and black cod on every single hook. And he was in the process of redoing his fish hold, so we had to put all the fish under wet blankets on the deck. So we were standing on piles of fish under wet blankets. And I remember making sandwiches in the galley. We stayed overnight and it was one of the best trips he had ever had. And we came in, and I got off the boat, and you get that feeling like you're sort of tipsy because everything's still moving. I remember walking up the street back to my apartment, and I had made $500 at 5%, and I was hooked. No pun intended, but it was all together 3 days, and it was the most amazing thing I ever did. It was really, really, really hard work, but it was very satisfying. And that was when I decided I'd become a fisherman.
Were your parents or grandparents in the fishing industry, or were you the first one in your family?
I was the first one. My dad, who lives in Redmond, Oregon, is an avid fly fisherman and a hunter, but I remember being drug around as a little girl to different rivers and lakes and watching him, and never really had much success at it, but he did it. And I might have had a pole in my hand once or twice when I was a little girl. I put worms all over myself once because they were in the bait bucket, but no, I was the first one. First and only one.
And how long were you a fisherman for, fisherwoman?
I was a fisherman from age 15 to 32, so 17 years.
And what stopped you from continuing your line of work?
When I was 18, I was still packing fish because I did that one trip and then I went back to packing fish. There were not many women in the fishing industry at all, unless they were connected to a husband or a partner or a family member on a boat. I didn't really notice any of them. I know of a couple of them. It was not easy to get onto a boat. So I ended up packing fish, and when I was doing that, I tore all the ligaments in my neck. I was pulling a 200-pound barrel full of fish carcasses and tore all the ligaments. It did not put me down, so to speak. I ended up working with it. 14 doctors and a physical therapist later. The physical therapist got me to the point where you're going to be in some degree of pain the rest of your life. Let's just learn how to manage it. And I had got a bump had popped out, so that ended up being a lipoma, a benign tumor that grew as I grew, so to speak. And when I was 32, it was the size of a grapefruit, and it had grown. The doctors all said there's no reason to get it removed except for cosmetic purposes. So had they taken it out, maybe things would have been different when it happened when I was 18 and tore all the ligaments. But by the time I was 32, I was in severe pain. I was like stuck like this, and I had a big, huge growth on my back that was like an octopus, and it was growing into all the muscles, and it became basically unbearable. Jeremiah and I had the Aguero by that time, and I'm not sure how it's not. I ended up getting Vicodin and Soma, muscle relaxers, from my doctor, so I was taking way more than prescribed, and it was not cutting through the pain. And it came to the decision, either be crippled, kill the captain and the crew by not functioning, get off the pain pills, and take care of your neck, which is what I did. And I found a doctor who said, whoa, you need to get that out of there. So what would have been a $2,000 in-office procedure ended up being major surgery, anesthesia, the whole 9 yards, 2-month recovery, but it's gone. And lo and behold, the neck pain went away. Now, was that from getting off the boat, or was that from the surgery? I don't know. But short answer for a long answer, I couldn't do it anymore. I'm not as big as I thought I was. I strove my whole life when I was fishing, not to prove that I was one of the guys, but I did the work of a man and did it well until I realized I couldn't anymore. So that's what got me off the boat.
Have you gone out since then?
I went out once, probably in the early 2004, maybe. Jeremiah's crewman, they were fishing salmon out of Bodega Bay, and his crew was doing some doctor's appointments, so I made a trip, a 1-week trip, a salmon trip. And it all came back to me, and it was beautiful weather, and I was running the gear, because salmon gear, once you learn it, it all comes back like riding a bicycle. And I was running all the gear, and we were catching really nice big salmon, and I I think it was probably a day and a half, I ended up getting tendonitis and my hands swelled up like baseballs because I hadn't been doing that in years. So yes, I made one trip, and I remember one of the reasons I married Jeremiah is I was running the gear and cleaning the fish, and my hands hurt so bad. He said, look, you just run the gear and I'll clean the fish. Which, when you're on a salmon boat, cleaning the fish is sort of everybody does it when you're getting a lot of salmon, but it's the crew's job more than anything. And I was always the crew. Jeremiah was the captain, which was fine. We were good. We were partners. But he cleaned all the fish, and I got to run the gear. But it hurt. But that was the last time I've been on the boat, because I realized I am either all or none. I want to be in the gaff pit catching the fish. When I got off the boat, lots of people said, why don't you just cook? Why don't you just, talk on the radio and run the boat? I don't want to do that. I want to catch the fish.
And did fishing ever get boring for you out there?
Yeah, albacore, I would say. A lot of albacore is you are traveling from point A to point B to get to the fishing grounds. And for instance, leaving Morro Bay, it takes 4 days, 24 hours a day to get from here to Newport, Oregon. So there's a lot of just sitting, but I like books. And also when you're not catching fish, I don't know if I would call it boring or frustrating. Both.
I'm going to backtrack to a question you answered previously. Just about women being in the fishing industry. I know there is a Morro Bay's women's fisherwomen's organization.
Central Coast Women for Fisheries.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Were you part of that? Did you support that?
I am part of it.
Is there anything about that you find helpful for the women here, or are you advocates for women to get into the fishing industry, and do you do any kind of community outreach about that, I guess?
It's comprised of, I think there's women who were fishermen on it, fishermen, fish. It's always such a weird one. I've always called myself a fisherman, just instead of trying to figure out what pronoun to use. But Diane Moody, who's a member, fished with her husband. There's a lot of women who did fish on that, and they have an amazing scholarship program. I'm not on the board, I'm just a member, and I help when I can help with whatever I can do. But I have thus far managed to stay off the board. I was on the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization board for years. I was the secretary for 5 years. No reason not to be on the board, I just don't have time. But they do an awesome albacore enchilada. They make albacore enchiladas once a year, day before Super Bowl, and sell them and raise money. They have a wonderful scholarship program, which I was a receiver of, a beneficiary of, when I was going to college. I got the scholarship for 2 years. 2 years? No, maybe every year I was in college. So definitely support that. And they support all the fishermen and fisherwomen and the families. They're a really good organization.
And did you go to college, was that after your fishing career, or was that prior?
That was after. I went to college when I was 33. And I remember being very worried that I'd be way too old for college, and I Googled it, and the average college age was 34 at Cuesta College. So I felt okay about that.
And going back a little more again, when you started in Morro Bay, or when you were growing up here, what did it look like? The Embarcadero, the maybe the downtown, the fish markets, processors? What did it look like in just the harbor?
It's a lot of people that have lived here forever say, oh my God, it's changed a lot, and isn't it awful? In my mind's eye, maybe I'm ever the optimist, but except for there were definitely a lot more fishing boats. And there was the boatyard right where the boatyard mall, I think it's a mall, the boatyard mall right by the Galley restaurant. That used to be one story without the hotel, across from Wavelines. There's some shops that are yellow, and that's called the boatyard. That used to actually be a boatyard. So they'd bring boats out of the water right there. And where Windows on the Water is, that 2-story building used to have lots of little funky looking buildings. It was not funkier in that sense. It hasn't really changed that much except for less processing plants. When I was packing fish at Morro Bay Seafood, there was Morro Bay Seafood. DeGaramore's had a processing plant. Dockside was a fish market and a processing plant. Qualman's Oysters, which became Morro Bay Seafood, which is now where Flying Dutchman is. So there was more fishing activity, but it really hasn't. I mean, if you drive down Morro Bay Boulevard, it hasn't changed much in 44 years.
Do you feel that the town's like local small town feel is being disrupted by tourism, or is that kind of always how it was, just tourists?
It's always how it's been. There's definitely more. We definitely were discovered. COVID burst Morro Bay. Nobody could go anywhere except the beach. And I'd say there's definitely more tourists. It used to be you could drive down the street and nobody would be here in the winter. I mean, there was literally no traffic in the winter. No cars, nobody. After 5 p.m. it was lights out. But I have always taken the position when I'm driving behind 500 cars and they don't know where they're going. Number one, when I'm out of town, I do the same thing. When I'm somewhere else, I don't know where I'm going. The person behind me is probably irritated, so I always think of that. I live in a place where they want to be and where they come to visit. I get to live here. So I've always sort of looked at the tourists like that, but no, it's a different kind of tourist. It used to be all the people from the valley who had second homes or who'd come to get out of the heat. That shifted. It's now more LA and San Francisco, and I mean, it's changing.
It's a good outlook to have with all these tourists.
I try, and it used to be probably, I'd say they're only here in the summer. That has changed. Now they seem to be here all the time. But, they're basically probably what keeps the town going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you were fishing, did you find any problems? Like, what were your biggest problems going out fishing? Was it price, regulation, permits, slip fees, or whatnot? Being
Jeremiah's partner, problems were things to be solved with solutions. And I'm not going to, there was always something going on. I did flash on times when we had the 27-foot rad and the blue moon, and we were driving back from Long Beach, and the bearing on the trailer went out, and we were on the side of the road in Malibu and had to fix that. But I forget how we did that if we didn't get a we could have gotten a ride on a seafood truck to Santa Barbara to get a part at the mechanic, and then drove back to Malibu, and Jeremiah fixed it on the side of the road. They called him duct tape. When we were out there 200 miles out, something happens, engine blows up, he'll fix it, he's not going in. So no matter what, unless he absolutely had to. Mechanical problems seem like that was that was always one you were always dealing with, because there were so many different components to a fishing boat that something was always breaking or needed to be tended to. But that in itself, you can normally fix all of that. Price was always an issue, because it always seemed, I mean, you'd come in with a load of swordfish and they'd say you're getting 25 cents for the opa, which are those beautiful round red fish. Have you seen pictures of those? They have big, huge red lips, and they're just the coolest fish in the world. Remind me, I'll show you a picture. I know we have one somewhere. But they were caught with the swordfish. Big, huge, round fish. 3 different kinds of meat. And they were hard to sell because the meat didn't have much of a shelf life. But you'd come in with a load of opa, moonfish. Yeah, moonfish. Beautiful fish. And they'd say 25 cents a pound. And you had just worked really, really hard to get them. Or the price of swordfish was down. Or the price of urchins. Price was always an issue. And running joke, you know, the buyers will screw you no matter what. But we found good buyers, and we always made it work. There was a time when we were selling the Florence, Jeremiah's first boat, and building the Blue Moon, the dive boat. And that was, you know, hard to breathe sometimes because it was stressful and there were payments and we had 2 boats. Then somebody came along out of the blue and bought the Florence. First albacore trip we were stuck in Ilwaco, Washington for a month and a half because they just wouldn't buy the albacore. They just did not want albacore anywhere. So we were running our refrigeration on the dock with probably 100 other boats in Ilwaco, which is, there's nothing there, nothing. It's a bar and a gas station and a laundromat. It was just this very, sort of a cool little town, but nothing there. And we, people lost their houses that season. People lost their families and their marriages and everything else. That was the tensest time, I would say.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I want to say 1998. It was the first year was it the first year I did albacore? Could have been the first year I did albacore. First or second. I did not get to do many albacore trips. The dream when we bought the Aguero, our 50-foot boat, was that we were going to sail into the sea and fish together until we both died. I'm not quite sure how I thought that was going to happen with the age difference, but till one of us died, I guess. But it didn't work that way. Pretty sure I only did albacore three years. But 1998. And then we ended up finding a buyer a month and a half later. And I remember walking down the dock. You'd walk down the dock with all of these boats full of albacore. And the tuna was, there was more albacore ever than any other season. So you were sitting on a load of albacore and you could not unload it and go get more albacore. It would have been an absolutely banner year, heyday. And you'd walk down the dock and you could hear the different refrigeration systems, and you knew if they were running okay because you could hear the tone of the engine, just how the engines, you could just hear it. And if a boat was quiet, hope the refrigeration didn't go down, because they'd lose 14 ton to 30 ton of fish. We were there a month and a half, and we found a buyer in San Pedro, California.
For the fish.
Yes. So Ilwaco, Washington, San Pedro, California. I forget how long it took us to get there. It would have had to be 7 days, running 24 hours a day, day and night, to get there. And there were 3 boats that unloaded, and I do not remember what we got per ton, but it was not good. That was, lots of things shifted then. Western Fish Boat Owners Association we had the American label, albacore. Was that Bumblebee who did that? It was a cannery situation. It was awful.
That's why they refused to buy.
I don't remember what I should have done research before I did this interview. Jeremiah probably covered all of that with you, you'd think. I don't remember what it was. I think it was the cannery issues. All the canneries were overseas. We didn't have any canneries here anymore, and they just refused to buy. We couldn't give it away. So yeah, we had 1 load that season. That might have been the 1 load we had that season. And we went to San Pedro and unloaded and came home.
How many loads typically are there in a season?
I'm gonna say 4 to 6.
Did you even think about going back out? As the tuna is coming down more south. Did you even think about that?
The tuna has not come in down here for years. It was, I think, maybe when we first had the boat, we took my dad and sister out on one trip. We were going out to do salmon, and it was the best, most wonderful experience of their life. We said, come on, and we ended up putting the albacore jigs on, and we had 100 fish. I wouldn't quit until we had 100 in a day. And they were just like, oh my God, to share that with my dad and my sister was absolutely insane. She's 2 years older than me, and the weather was beautiful, and the fish were there, and they got to, bring them in, and we anchored in San Simeon. It was really very cool. But since then, the albacore haven't been here. They were here years ago. They just aren't doing that circuit. And when we came back from San Pedro, I'm sure we put a jig in to maybe try to catch a fish, but nobody would buy them that year.
And then after that year, did you continue fishing for albacore, or did you switch it to salmon?
No, what we would do is we'd do swordfish and shark. We'd do albacore June, July and August in Oregon, come home, take the albacore gear off, which was the easy part because it was jigs and leader boxes, and put the swordfish gear on, which was a net reel and all of the hydraulics and the level wind and the guard so that the net didn't get in the wheel, and put all of the swordfish gear on. And then we'd go sword fishing from September to December, and then we'd put the salmon gear on in April and do salmon from May to June, and then put the albacore gear on. So we were here at the house probably a couple months.
And it was just you sitting there and were you trying to find work, or were you just re-outfitting your boat?
No, we were working on the boat. Yeah. but so we were home here for 2 months working on the boat, and then you have to haul the boat out during that time and paint the bottom and do all of the maintenance that you have to do throughout the year. We were not here very long. We were probably gone 10 months out of the year fishing.
And when you were here, you were kind of spending money you didn't really have.
No. I mean, then we were making really good money because we were making money as we were fishing.
Right.
So no, we were able to, fishing bought us the house, the truck, the car. It got us plot in Morro Bay. Yeah, no, it was good to us. And when we were diving, when we had the blue moon after we sold the Florence and Jeremiah was in partners with Randy with the blue moon, we were doing sea urchins in abalone, and he went up to Point Arena. That was before we had this house. We rented a house in North Morro Bay. But I had gotten off the boat due to my neck. I got trained in the DOS computer system and became a receptionist. That lasted about a year. So I worked for R. Howard Strausbaugh Incorporated in San Luis, and realized I can't do this. 8 to 5 was not in my game plan. So Jeremiah needed a tender, so I ended up being his tender on the dive boat. And there were maybe 2 women out of 60 guys. It was awesome. I loved it. It was just, I was in my element. But we dove the Channel Islands in Santa Barbara and San Clemente Island. So we'd go out there for 5 days, and then he'd be diving deep, and they'd have to gas off, they call it, and they'd get a little ringy from being deep diving that long. We had a boat that would come out and pick up the sea urchins, bring us beer and fuel and groceries. We'd tell them what we wanted, so we'd side tie to them, unload the sea urchins, stay at San Clemente Island, keep working. We probably went in with abalone. They might have picked up abalone too. And then when we needed a break, we'd go to Catalina for a couple days and hang out in Catalina, party, and then go back to work there. If the weather was bad, go into Long Beach, Belmont Shores, Seal Beach. We were making really good money. It was when I think of everything I got to do in 17 years, I would not trade all of the bad times, because there were way too many good times. You never see a sunset like you see out there. Sunrises.
Sounds like a dream.
It truly was. I mean, it was physically demanding. It was challenging. We went to Mexico once. We were doing albacore. We were going south, and we had what was called a drift chute. So it's like this, it just got in the way, stayed on the bow, and it was in a trash can, and it was an anchor, like a big parachute that you throw out if it's windy, because when you're doing albacore, you're drifting. And we had a round bottom boat. And Jeremiah we might have differed on this one. He always thought, oh, this boat rides so well. When you're drifting, she rolled. She just rolled. I mean, it was fine, but you're continuously hanging on, no matter what, when you're on a boat. You're always hanging on. You were just hanging on. And we were going south to go albacore fishing, and Jeremiah said, I said, well, we're taking the drift chute, right? He said, no, we don't need that. We're going south. It doesn't blow down there. It never blows down there, right? And we were out for 2 weeks, and it never blew under 30 miles per hour. And it was absolute victory at sea. It was just awful. And that was when my neck was pretty much to the breaking point. I'd just sit on the back hatch crying because it hurt so bad. That was when I was realizing I am not helping this business at all. I got to get off the boat. That was the breaking trip, I think. But it blows down south too.
Moral of the story.
Yeah.
Back here in Morro Bay, any of the big name guys like Giannini or Biagini?
Jody Giannini. Giannini.
Harold?
Oh yeah.
Harold. Did they make?
Is he abalone? Maybe.
Did they make an impact on the community? And if so, like how did they do that? How so?
Biagini, I don't really he was in the abalone business. You're going to the movie, right? Have you seen the abalone movie? Monday?
Mather's wife actually showed it to me in their
okay.
home, as a little sneak peek.
You know they're playing it, right? Monday. Are you going?
No, I've seen it.
You should go. I don't know if they have any tickets left. I think Jeremiah said there were 3 tickets left. They might have sold out, but you should So the abalone movie, Biagini's, I don't really know about the Biagini's. I know the name, but Jody Giannini with Giannini's gear store made a huge impact on the community and the fishermen and me. I packed fish when I packed fish for Morro Bay Seafood. I think he might have had some interest in it, but whatever it was, Morro Bay Seafood was on Scott Street, and he was on Surf, or the one right in front where the marine store is now, Jerry's. Jody had the big one that is Verge's now, and I'd go over there and get gloves and stuff, fillet knives and stuff needed, but he was amazing, and he gave the fishermen loans, and he didn't charge interest, and he was just a really good guy. That's changed about Morro Bay, that whole thing, going into the gear store and just having all the fishermen in their hub talking about everything. Yeah, Jody, he was a good guy.
So the community, even within the fishing, like the fishing community itself, has changed. Like there's always, I hear about like a sense of camaraderie, and everyone would share everything. And Susie Martin, if you know her, Travis Evans' daughter.
Oh yeah, I think I only met her once.
She said she would always like bake things for when they were tying together out, anchored out in the sea. And
yeah, Avila, Morro Bay.
Yeah, they would always trade things. And
yeah,
just a real sense of like community. And I've heard that that's changed. Do you feel like that's true?
No, I'd say not having been in it. When I walk into any when you have fishermen together, or when a fisherman needs help, the group of fishermen anywhere will come in and help that person. It is a united family that I don't think will ever change, because you're tied together and you're doing something nobody else knows really what you're doing, and you can't explain it. And when you're out there, the people who are your friends, not friends, your partners are going to do whatever they can to help you. I don't think that's changed. I don't think it ever will. I think of there's less fishermen, obviously, so that's changed, and there's not as many, and the ones there are older. That lunch I was telling you about, I went down at the tail end of it, and I was introducing our nephew to some of the guys there, and they're old. Jeremiah, I'd love to say he's not old, and in my mind maybe 76 isn't old, but it's old, or it's, I was just looking at them, and I'm older. I was 19 when we got together, and I really started Well, no, I guess I made my first salmon trip when I was 18. But no, they're all still, I don't think that's changed. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. The fire that happened this last year, was that Washington? Yes, it was Ilwaco. The dock burned down. Can't think of the name of the seafood company, but crab pots were on the dock, and the pier burned down with all of the crab pots, and it was right before opening day. So all of the crabbers lost all their pots. Did you hear about that?
No.
It was on Facebook. I want to look at Facebook to see what's going on. It was on Facebook, and everybody from Santa Barbara, probably further south, drove up to that area with trucks and trailers and gear, and got all of those guys fishing by opening day. Every single one of them had pots to put in the water. I mean, it was absolutely mind-blowing. I forget how much they raised on the GoFundMe page for the families and the people. People were baking. People were making sandwiches. It was huge. It was the most amazing thing to witness, just to be a part of. And if that happened here, it'd be the same thing. When Chuck Marciel, M&M Refrigeration, had an ammonia leak, and it was a big, huge deal, they evacuated us here. They evacuated the whole town. It was really pretty stupid. It happened down on Beach Street, and he was a refrigeration guy, and I forget what it was, but it was an ammonia leak, and the whole of Morro Bay went, ah! And they were suing him for, I forget how much money, but everybody came together and did a fundraiser and backed him. And it'd be the same thing right now. There's just less of them, less of us.
Is that due to, obviously people aging out, but also no one coming in, and then these, big corporations trying to shut you down?
I don't know, I'd say it's the big corporations as much as I'd say regulation. We have been regulated to death. And nobody wants to come into Morro Bay because you can't get enough fish to supply, and where there's no chain to go out. Like, I think the processing plants went out because of water issues, couldn't afford the water, and all the draggers. The Nature Conservancy bought all the draggers. And the quota program and all of that. That was the demise of Morro Bay when the draggers got wiped out. I mean, it was wide open. When I was packing fish, it was 14 hours a day. It was just day and night, wide open. Dover, Rex, sole, rock cod. I was in such good shape. It was, and then the draggers went away, so all of that whole thing went. More than anything, it's aging out. And there aren't young people. Who wants to come into a business where today, if you want to buy a boat, you're looking at least $200,000 to start? Who's got that kind of money? The people who bought our boat, Travis and Ashley and Vivian, their daughter, got a really, really, really good deal. But they also got a boat that was old, with one engine was 25 years old. I don't know how old the other engine was. A lot of old machinery, and Jeremiah knew that, giving it to him. But we gave our baby to a young couple, and she is just, both of them, but Ashley she sells seafood, and she is invested in protecting the fishermen and the families and getting good fresh seafood out to the public. And he is repowering the boat and fishing it and taking care of it. It was the biggest blessing that could have ever happened. Because, I mean, you know, some people sell their boat and it ends up just rusting away or not being taken care of or sunk.
And where's this couple?
They are in Eureka.
Eureka.
Yeah. Eureka, California.
And you think the fishing industry is going to, you know, die here in Morro Bay, or do you think there's continuation maybe here with the young guys? Garrett, you know, Garrett Rose.
Garrett is just a good guy. Yeah, I know Garrett.
They say he's kind of the rising star, upcoming
He
young,
is.
young guy.
He has tenacity and perseverance, and he's a good fisherman, and he's a good businessman, and he knows how to jump when one thing. He seems to be able to move with the tide, so to speak. A lot would have to change, and a lot of it's going to depend on the wind. The wind farms. That is going to change the complexion of Morro Bay as we know it. And yeah, it'll be probably 10 years down the road, but if that happens, it's going to industrialize this town. There's no way it can't. I don't know if they opened up more area for rock cod, if there was enough to be brought in, if fuel prices went down, if fish prices went up. I don't know. I can't answer that question. It hasn't died yet, but just thinking of the boats that are left. Bill Blue, his kids, does he have his kids on the boat right now? I don't even know if his kids are fishing with him because he's getting older. Bob Meharry getting older. Tom Hafer's thinking about moving to Hawaii. He's getting older. I don't know. That's a hard one.
Is there anyone that I can talk to that you know, I know you're out of the industry now, but still have connections, but is there anyone that I can talk to that you think could answer that question, or any of the...
Have you talked to Garrett?
I've not talked to Garrett yet.
That's Garrett.
Okay.
Yeah, Garrett, and then you can tell me what Garrett says, because Garrett is the one who is gonna make it happen and is making it happen. He's running the fish company. That in itself is huge. Keeping that open. We almost lost that when Santa Monica Seafood backed out. I mean, we don't have a salmon season this year. They shut that down again. They supposedly shut down swordfish, so there weren't any more swordfish. Not that we had a huge, well, we used to have a fleet of sword fishermen here, but sword fishermen would unload swordfish here. Now you can't do swordfish, so we don't have that anymore. I don't know.
Do you think the closure of the salmon season was a good idea?
No, not at all. And I think if anything, when we were fishing salmon, they shut it down, we got relief. They helped the fishermen when they shut the salmon season down. It was shut down last year. I don't think anybody's gotten any relief, financial relief. And if they haven't gotten it for last year, are they going to get it for this year? If our government's going to do that, they should support the fishermen, which is one thing California has never done, is support its fishermen.
So all this is coming out of the state government rather than the federal, like the support and these organizations and things?
I think yeah, because it's state waters, so it must have been state money we got when they closed it down. And is it, I mean, when you say, do I think it's a bad thing or a good thing? Of course it's awful for the fishermen, because a lot of people, if you don't have another fishery to fall back on, and you depend on your salmon season, or you depend on your crab season, which is that whole mess with the whales, if you don't have it for 2 years, you're gonna have to look for something else. You're not going to be able to keep your boat in a slip and pay the slip fees. You're not gonna be able to pull it out of the water and paint it. And you can't have boat insurance unless you haul your boat out every 2 years, and you should haul your boat out every 2 years no matter what. And you've got to repack your life raft, and you've got to do all of that maintenance, or you won't be able to run the boat because the boat will fall apart. And you can't do any of that if you don't make money fishing. And if you can't fish 2 years down the road, maybe I'll become a truck driver, or who knows what. But I don't know. They say the salmon, there aren't enough of them coming up the river, or not enough got up the river to spawn, so that's why they do it. And it's like really, really convoluted and really confusing, and I would not, even though I sat in Pacific Coast Fishery, PCFFA, Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Association, I went to those meetings in previous years where they were talking about the different rivers and the numbers and how it maybe be a season, and negotiated it and everything else. I didn't understand crap about it, but maybe there aren't enough fish. I don't know. It's interesting. I am not a conspiracy person at all. Do not think the contrails are doing anything. You know, I do not think like that. It is very coincidental that things are happening with the fisheries as they are, the closer the wind farms come to fruition or get closer. For instance, fisheries being shut down, new bills. There was a bill, AB 222, that I think fell apart, that was draconian, that just came up, and I think it fell. I don't think it happened, but it was no more sea bass fishing, no more halibut fishing, no more swordfish fishing. And every single person, if they had a commercial fishing license, no matter the size of your boat, had to have an observer on the boat. I mean, things that would not be, you could not fish, not sustainably or any other way. And somebody in legislature put that bill out. Things like that are happening. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but if there's less fishing out there, it'd be a heck of a lot easier to get that through. It's just weird.
And these people on the heads of these organizations or councils or boards or whatever, are they fishermen? Have they?
Who, on what, like legislatures putting those bills out?
Yeah.
No. No, they probably live in the Ozarks. No, I don't know. But no, and that's one thing that's always been really interesting with regulation and everything else is, no, they do not have fishermen creating these legislative actions or the marine protected areas. I was a stakeholder for the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization, and it was probably one of the most disgusting, horrific things I've ever done in my life. They would have the meetings up in Monterey at a very fancy hotel for $100 a night. Back then, it was pretty cheap, probably $500 a night now. And we would sit at the table, and we were what was called a stakeholder because we had a stake in it. And there'd be 40 of them and 2 of us, and they'd vote. And they got, the MPAs went through, and all it did was create angst and ulcers and everything else. But we had to be sitting at the table, because if we wouldn't be, I thought back then maybe we'd change something by being there, and I would not go to the table now if asked. Because it's not rigged, it's just the way it is. But, you know, we went to the React fundraiser, React, which is the group that is against the wind farms. And every single one of those people at one time in my life were on the other side of the table. And we're all now on the same side of the table. So we all care about the ocean. How can fishermen not care about the ocean? That's where they get their catch from.
Can we move on to something a little more lighthearted? You tell me about some of the most memorable experiences you've had. Either, you know, you could be shore duty or, you know, out fishing.
Most memorable. As weird as it sounds, it wasn't a fun, grand one, but it was a very exciting one. We were sword fishing in between Catalina Island and San Clemente, and our boat's borderline small for swordfish, just because when you had the net on the deck, it was, I think, 40,000 pounds on top of the deck, so it made the boat sort of top heavy. And we put the mile-long net out, and it was Jeremiah did not like swordfish because there was just too much. You had to get the net in the nth degree of where the water was, and you had to map it every single, like, all day. And I loved it because it was fascinating, and I did the hydraulics, so I was, and I mean, you know, it was just really, you never knew what you were gonna get. Like, you'd go to sleep and you'd wake up, and if you didn't have to turn around on the net in the middle of the night because the wind switched or the wind died, you had to have some kind of wind, or that net would just roll into itself. And it's like, oh my God, you never in your life think that something this big and long, sometimes it comes up as a mess. But when you're bringing it up, you never know what you're gonna get. I mean, are you gonna get big, huge swordfish? Are you gonna get nothing? Sometimes there was a piece of kelp in that goddamn net, the whole thing. And it took hours to bring it up. And there'd be nothing in it. No shit, a piece of kelp. But we were out there and they were calling 25 knots, which is, you know, not great, but not bad. And we woke up we had put the net out in the water, and it hung straight down. I forget how far down that thing went. Quite a ways, like a big huge wall in the water with buoys all the way down to the end to the radar reflector. And we woke up and we heard, you've been on the docks where the wind is in the rigging. You've heard that sound. It's a sound, I don't even know if you'd know it unless you were like staying on a boat, but it's the sound of the cables hitting against the mast. There's no other sound like it. It's blowing. The wind is blowing, and it's a really interesting sound. Alan on the long fin, have you interviewed him? He has the long fin down Beach Street. He just put a new mast up, and with lots of, you know, lines and rigging. And we walked down there the other day, and it was blowing hard, and you could hear it from across the street, just like clanging and twinging and
something like a flagpole and a
yeah, with the wind running through it. And we woke up to that sound, and you can feel it. when you're on the boat. In the forecastle, the water's slapping and you're down under the water when you're in the forecastle. So, you know, we heard weather. And we got up. I had to wait until it was light to pull. We might have started bringing the net back in, but it was blowing 75. And it was friggin' like, holy shit. I mean, it was bad. And my job was on this side of the net and Jeremiah was on that side, and he took all the big buoys off and the pingers, which are these little electronic devices that are about that big. They were red and they all have a battery in them, and they ping, and they kept mammals away. So we had to have those in this net. Things get wrapped up in nets, and you had to have them attached. We sewed them into the net. And then we had some on snaps. What they were was a major pain in the ass. But you had to take those all off. And I ran the lever that brought the net up and stopped the net. And we were on the back deck, and when you're pulling the net, it's off the stern, and the waves were coming over, just going all the way to the smokestacks. The very top of the boat was just salted. So we were obviously underwater. And it went right down my slickers. It was freezing cold. It was just one of those, like, there were 3 times in my life in 17 years, which is pretty good, that I thought I was gonna die. Only 3. And when you think about it, when you do it your whole life, that's pretty good. But that was one of them. And this one wave came over and knocked both of us back, and I went away for a minute. I sort of thought, oh, I'm in the ocean now. I'm not on the boat anymore. I mean, it pulled my hand from the lever. It was just insane. And Jeremiah got flung into the net, and we had what's called a dead man, which you reach up and stop the net so that you don't get wrapped up in the net. And he used that, luckily, because he was in the net. And I really thought I was swimming, because I was, but I was still on the deck. And he said, shut the fucking reel off. And it was like, oh, okay, here we are, we're here. And I turned the net off. And then we finished got the net on the boat. There was one other boat, the Karen Maria, sword fisherman out of San Diego, really nice guy, Miguel, just the nicest guy you'd ever meet. And they were fishing swordfish, and they stood by, when you're talking about fishermen, that unity. They stood by in that crap, in that god-awful weather, until we got our net up. And Jeremiah, he got on the radio and said, just go in. We were going to anchor at Pyramid Cove, which was this beautiful anchorage on San Clemente Island. Oh, just beautiful, just a gorgeous spot in the world. But he said, no, we're staying right here until you get that net on the boat. We're not leaving. And they were right there. There were 2 cruise ships who were in the lee of the islands, because it was too shitty for them to be out. Cruise ships, rather large boats. Mm-hmm. I always wondered if anybody got footage of what must have looked like just this little teeny weeny boat in the big huge ocean, 2 idiots on the back deck. I mean, I'm sure somebody on one of those cruise ships must have seen it. What are they doing? And we had one swordfish, which we had to get out of the net, and it just rolled over, back and forth, over on the deck, and it was like, oh my God. I mean, you don't want to fish in that shit. It was a little one, not little, but 150, 200 pounds. But got the net up and got into Pyramid Cove and got anchored. And the whole beauty of that whole story is, the main thing I remember about that is getting to the anchorage and putting the anchor down and just going, yes, you know, we did it. We're here. We're alive. I mean, and okay, maybe we didn't make any money at all. It was god awful, terrible, blah, 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 blah. But it was just, that was the whole thing of fishing, was no matter what, you are alive. Absolutely, truly, totally alive. And you're all alone with someone else. I mean, there's only one other person. Except somebody's always on the radio. When I fished, I did my first salmon trip when I was 17, just turned 18, maybe 18. Because I've got a birthday coming up next Wednesday. So probably just turned 18. And it was a guy from Morro Bay on the Isabella. My roommate was a fisherman. Jeremiah was a fisherman. Randy Can was a fisherman. Joan Annecy, Bob Meharry. I knew all of these fishermen. And Tony Castle was, the fishermen have different groups, you know, code groups, secret channels. You don't share information with those fishermen if you're on them, because if you said to everybody on channel 16, hey, I just had 50 fish, they'd all come in and there goes the bite. So it was somewhat territorial. And Jeremiah, they had a group. Tony had his group. Bobby Silva was in it. Jerry Reesley was the Janice R. He had his group and they had their group. And he needed a crew person. And I'd never fished salmon, and I said yes. And it was 3 months. And it was like, you know, when I think about it now, wow, to get on a boat and go, it pretty, you know, just pretty weird. Not weird. Anyways, I did it. And he taught me, he didn't have insulation in his fish hold. It was an old Liberty barge. It was a beautiful little boat. So he had barrels for the salmon that he filled with ice and water and made a slush, and then he blew ice around all the barrels so they'd be encased in ice. And my job was using a devil's fork, which is this big, huge, not huge, a big stick with a fork on it. And I had to chop the ice around the barrels to get the barrels out when we unloaded and get all the ice out of the fish hold. And there was no insulation, so the ice was like cement. And I couldn't pop the barrel. God forbid you poke a hole in the barrel. Oh, it was brutal. It was brutal. It was like, I cannot believe I'm even doing this kind of brutal. But that was my job, so I did it. And he'd sit on his chair and listen to blues. And he I don't want to say he wasn't a good fisherman, but he was like, just, I can't catch anything. The fish aren't there. But it was enough for me, and we did okay. And he taught me how to clean salmon, and I'm left-handed, so everything's ass backwards. The fillet tray that you put a salmon in, there's a place for the head to sit, because you've got to get around the fins and you've got to get the bloodlines and everything. It was all backwards. So that must have been challenging for him. I think he might have turned that cleaning tray around. Anyways, he taught me how to bring in the fish. He taught me a lot. But so I was on the Isabella, and Jeremiah was on the Florence, and Randy was on the 20 grand, and Bob Meharry and Joe were on the Trapper, and all these guys were around. Well, every morning, even though Tony wasn't in Jeremiah's code group, they let him into his group. I'm sure there were bets going around about how long I'd last. You know, it's a girl in a guy's world, and they knew me, but is she gonna make it or is she not? never did find out one way or another what happened. But every morning and every night, Jeremiah would get on the radio and he'd call Tony and he'd say, how's Trudi? Not how's Trudi, tell Trudi good evening. Tell Trudi good morning. Just like, and it was just this, I don't know, a little connection. Like I knew, even though I knew I wasn't alone. No matter what, I knew that there was somebody on one of those other boats checking in on me, sorta, which was pretty cool. And we weren't together yet. I was stalking him. I was wholeheartedly stalking him, but I was too young to, didn't want anything to do with me because I was too young. So then we ended up, probably the most memorable minute, we ended up at Moss Beach up above Half Moon Bay at a restaurant. There were about 16 fishermen and fish buyers. And Jeremiah and I were sitting next to each other. And everybody else sort of faded into the background, and it was like just him and I talking. And I was struck. And he might have been struck too, because then he kept fishing, I came home. And couldn't find another boat, because I went on a sport boat and that didn't last. They were pulling up these little tiny rock cut. And I threw the first one back and I said, well, you can't keep that, it's too small. And the captain said, Trudi, what are you doing? And I said, oh, can't keep that. We don't have a size limit. We have a number limit. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't even get food off of that. And it didn't. People were puking. This one poor girl had puke all over in her hair. It was like, I was one day on a sport boat.
One day, yes.
Oh yeah, it was like I got off that boat and said, I'm sorry, I don't think this is gonna work out. You guys can do this. Anyways, it was very cool. I could think of a million other stories, but
I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could
Yeah.
go on. Yeah.
yeah, they were. It was just, and that's one thing when I became a court reporter. The first deposition I did, I was very nervous because you don't know anything about anything. They teach you how to write at 225 words on the machine. They don't really tell you anything about the attorneys, how they're gonna be, what to say. What's an O&1? I had no idea. It's an original and one copy, and it's the transcript, and they might order it or they might not. And I mean, it was just like, probably the same first day I went fishing. And I had a wonderful mentor who owned Merit Court Reporting, but we were sitting there, and I was 41 when I got out of school. I think I was 41, so I wasn't young, obviously, and I don't think I said I was new, but I probably looked new, because I was trying to pretend I'd done it forever, but I probably didn't look like that. And the guy said, so the attorney said, well, what'd you do before this? And I said, oh, well, I fished commercially. And he was just like, oh my God, really? What'd you fish for? And I said, well, we did rock cod and abalone and urchin and swordfish and shark and salmon. And we had this conversation, and when the deposition started 10 minutes later, I was so relaxed. And he was looking at me not like a court reporter with the machine, like you could see the shift in his eyes. Probably the first one being, wow, I wished I could have done that. So that was the first deposition. 12 years later, I've honed it. I have my 26-pound salmon on my business card. It's my Zoom profile picture. and it's me holding a salmon that I caught with Jeremiah that was like the most amazing fish ever in the whole wide world, that he let me get on the boat. He was not the guy who said, move over, I'm doing that, because he was very, very, he wanted the fish on the boat. It was a nice paycheck, but he just showed me how to play it. He just kept, because I was still new, and it was our first season up off of Big Surg. It was beautiful, blowing northeast, so it was really just beautiful weather. And this fish, she came up out, it was a female because she had roe. She came up out of the water and spun, like jumped up and spun and dove back down, and I have no idea how she stayed on the hook. And Jeremiah the whole time, every once in a while, I'd say, you want me to take it? I'm like, no, I got it. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, no. And he's like, okay, just give it a little bit of line, just play it, just okay. And got it on the boat. But that's on my business card. So when I hand them my business card, they see that and go, oh my God. And now if you get that into the conversation, she's not just a court reporter, she was a fisherman. It garners respect from men, especially, and women. But so I'm still carrying it with me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you called Jeremiah, you get my voice.
Yeah.
Which I've often thought maybe I ought to change that, but I probably won't.
It's a nice touch, knowing both of you are still very connected to the industry.
Yeah, and it's funny, he seems to be doing okay. Not having that, I don't know if he doesn't tell me, I know he doesn't tell me everything, because I tend to try to ferret it all out, but he seems to be adjusting okay to not having the boat.
Yeah.
When I got off the boat, all hell broke loose in my head, because I thought I was done. I thought, this is it. This is my life. I did this from the time I was 16 to 32. Now what am I going to do? And then he'd leave with the boat. And that was my place and my spot. And it was pretty bad.
He seems to be doing all right as well. Yeah, he hangs out a lot at the Maritime Museum.
Thank God he
going down
has
there
that.
and everything,
Yeah. Thank God he has that. I think that's been a big help. Yeah, and I mean, you know, if you wanted to get a little boat, but you notice what we got in the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, I noticed you mentioned a lot of names at the end there. Alan,
You haven't talked to Alan? Alan on the longfin. Alan Aldrich.
and the other names when you mentioned when you were anchoring together. And you
Bob
would call.
Meharry. Randy Can. Joe Nancy. Bob Meharry just got back from crabbing. Jeremiah didn't mention those names?
He mentioned Bob. He didn't
Okay,
mention the
Bob
other ones.
Meharry. Alan is the treasurer for Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization.
How about the women's
Central
the president? Yeah.
Lenore, whose husband is Bill Ward, who has the Dancing Bear. They're out of Avila. There is a meeting. Some of those classes. I think there's a meeting. There is a Central Coast Women for, there's a CCWF meeting sometime. We'll have all their names on it. Well, that's old. The meetings go to Jeremiah's email. So I am a part of CCWF, but apparently I don't try too hard because I haven't told him to use my email. That's not good, is it? It's okay though. Anyways, if you wanted, I could put something out to CCWF if you want me to find women.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
Diane is in Canada, so you won't be able to get her. Diane was Diane's Wayne Moody's wife, and they bought a trailer. He retired. They were sort of our running partners. They had this beautiful sailboat, gorgeous sailboat, and she fished on the boat with him for years. They built the boat together. They have a beautiful story about building their fishing boat together, and then she got off the boat because she just did not like it, and she went into teaching. But I remember thinking, how could you not like this? And Wayne's from Kentucky, and Diane does all the cooking and the windows and the cleaning, and she's this little tiny woman who is just, I mean, she was ferocious on the boat when it came to being able to do it. And Wayne they sort of took us under their wing or just watched us. I remember Wayne saying something about windows and me laughing and saying, windows? I don't do windows. And I don't cook. So, you know, it was sort of funny. They're wonderful. But they just left for Alaska for 5 months. They got a trailer. And they spent 5 months in Alaska last year. They sold the boat. And they're the same age. So she retired, he retired. We can't do it quite that way because I'm not retired. But she's gonna be gone until you're out of school. Yeah. But I'll put it out and see if there's any women who want to talk to you. Lenore's the president. Tom Hafer's wife, Sherry. Have you interviewed Tom Hafer?
He said he would get back to me.
Okay, the president of NBCFO. Because you could get his wife. You could get like double duty there. Both of them. She's on the board of CCWF. There's a few women. I'll send an email.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. What's your timeline? You're running out of time, right?
3 weeks to the end of, or it's due June 15th.
Okay.
So I've got about a month.
Yeah.
Almost a month.
Yeah. Less than a month now.
Yep.
Okay. God, where does the time go? Hey, on Memorial Day, you probably have plans, but if you don't, I do a Lost at Sea ceremony in Cayucas, and it's from 3 to 4 at the base of the Cayucas Pier. We don't have the Vets Hall Plaza, obviously, because they're rebuilding the Vets Hall, but it's an hour long, and I carry the wreath for the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization. We start at the base of the pier. There's an invocation, just a little welcome to the Lost at Sea ceremony. It is to honor all of those lost at sea, whether they be military, civilian, surfers, fishermen, anyone lost at sea. And then we do a POW MIA ceremony for those still missing, little ceremony. Questa choir sings, we have a bagpiper. And then we all form up and walk down to the end of the pier. And I'm carrying the wreath this year with Eddie Sylvester, whose brother Dickie Sylvester just died last year. He had the Trudi S. His wife was named Trudi. And his daughters are gonna be there. So I always pick a fisherman to carry the wreath with me, and the Coast Guard. And we all walk out and then pass the pier, or pass the wreath around to the crowd to touch. And then we consecrate it into the ocean. Taps is played. rifle salute, and then the warbirds do a flyover. So 3 little planes, really cool. It's over by 4. So it's beautiful. This is the 22nd year, and I've been doing it for 22 years. Bill Houston, who you would have just this wonderful man, he was a Navy chaplain, came up to me and said, "Hey, would you want to carry the wreath for the Fishermen's Organization?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah, I can do that, whatever." And it was like, oh my God, what an honor. So now we have a committee, which I have somehow ended up being the head of, because everybody on it, the guy doing the invocation is Jim Murphy, and he's 91, and he is just the coolest old guy, and he's like sharp as a tack, right? We have meetings throughout the year, we got everything going. So I sent an email out a couple days ago saying, oh yeah, we're ready, you know, it's all good. And he sent me an email back saying, refresh my memory. I'm like, oh my God, Jim, lost at sea? Remember? You're gonna like say, so anyways, the people on the committee are 92, 91. I suckered one young girl who's going to Cal Poly into it. Red Davis. Did you ever know Red Davis? He was the city council here in Morro Bay. Anyways, I got his granddaughter. So I got someone younger than me who's probably a few years from now going to go, oh, she's old. Anyways, if 3 to 4, it's awesome. It's just a really cool ceremony. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I actually have any plans. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sounds like it can go there.
Yeah, it's always just a nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. And Cayucas is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, wherever, whenever. Okay, I'll call CCW. I'll send them. And Jeremiah has all of those names. Alan might not be an interview kind of a guy.
Okay.
But you can ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what are you going to do? Just like put it all together?
Yeah, you know the interviews on the Maritime Museum's website with all the old guys. Some of them have passed. It's going to be something like that. Yeah, so I'm as least editing as possible.
Oh, wow.
And it'll all be presented as an hour and 27.
Did we do an hour and 27?
Hour and 27.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sitting down with me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
No, I love hearing myself talk. I'm going to give you my business card too, just because.